The views and opinions expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of KTOO Public Media. This program may contain discussions that include terminology or perspectives that reflect different time periods, cultural contexts, or viewpoints that may not align with contemporary standards or expectations.
When an animal is as exciting in its proximity to ourselves as a whale can be, there's no question that people will pursue a humpback whale. They will go to it.
There are 3 altars in the church here. The main altar is dedicated to the Archangel Michael, and the right side altar is dedicated to Saint Innocent, who's the original architect and builder of the church, and our left side is dedicated to Our Lady of Sitka.
Because we have so many gray days in the spring, and if you get your bulbs in the ground and you get some color in the early spring, it gives you the enthusiasm and kind of the hope to get out there and plant the garden for the rest of the year.
Those of us who choose Southeast Alaska as our home share a spectacular land, the Inside Passage, which touches each of our communities, and our weather. Some suggest the weather in Southeast comes in only 2 conditions, rain and about to rain. And some think the annual precipitation should be measured, like the Inside Passage, in fathoms. But the fact is, our marine climate produces our unique corner of the world. Good evening, I'm Scott Foster, and welcome to Rain Country, a weekly television journal of the places, faces, and activities that join us together as Southeast Alaskans. We begin, appropriately enough, underneath the water, with one of the Earth's mightiest creatures and the whale man of Southeast, who's made a career studying them. They're 45 feet long, but feed on small herring and krill. They winter in Mexico and Hawaii, but migrate 3,000 miles to summer in Southeast Alaska. They weigh 33 tons, but can jump their entire body completely out of the water. Humpback whales are the sight of Southeast Alaska, and Chuck Juraz is the whale man of Southeast and beyond.
And I suddenly recognized that the wind at my back, just a light breeze, had been blowing me closer and closer to this animal. And I then recognized that if I didn't move myself, I would literally blow right up onto its back, so I'd better move. So I lifted up the oar, I inserted it into the oarlock. I took a sweep on the oar and made a high screeching sound of metal on metal. And that animal, much as a young man flexing his muscle, became very well defined. The center of the body rose out of the water in what obviously was a flexure of the nose dropping towards the tail and the tail dropping towards the nose, and then a tremendous thrust on that tail threw the animal down. And I thought, oh, gee, I've wakened a whale. And I was okay for about a half a minute. My camera's last shot was at 15 feet. That was the focal set. The next thing I knew is I saw this vessel rise out of the water because it looked like a Nautilus submarine coming out, and it went up. I grabbed my camera in time to take a picture. Remember, focused at 15 feet. The only thing that's in focus is a wall of water and droplets at 15 feet. The animal then breached 7 more times, which allowed me 2 pictures with my hand steady, and probably 3 more very, very quivery, because I recognized, Juraz, you've done yourself in. If this animal lands on you, you are dead.
It didn't, and Juraz isn't. What he is a Juneau High School biology teacher who grew up in the dry flatlands of the Midwest, but became fascinated with whales when he moved to Juneau in the mid-60s. After spending some 60,000 hours on the water watching them, Juraz stopped counting the time, but continued the work. Since then, Juraz and his nonprofit education and research organization, SeaSearch, has made a series of discoveries that have placed their names among the serious whale researchers in the world. Juraz ticks off facts about humpbacks as smoothly as water running off the whale's back.
Here in southeast Alaska, if you go out in the winter and you see a whale, wouldn't surprise me if the downtime is 1/2 hour. Right. If we only have 5 hours of daylight, then you might only see that animal 10 times in a daylight hour, okay, or in daylight period. In contrast to that, in the summer, an animal might be down for 8 minutes, or 5 minutes, or 3 minutes, and then come up to the surface and take 8 breaths just in between that. Okay, that means, of course, we see much more of the animal. The behaviors in the summer are much more dynamic. There are surface activities. The feed is near the surface. Their arguments with one another occur at the surface. In the winter, fewer arguments. The feed is down deep. The activity is very, very, very reduced.
Where they congregate depends on the patterns of human movement and feed.
There's very little question now, but that aside from feed characteristics, whales are responsive to what we do as human beings. And when we use an area a lot with vessels, there's no question that the animals respond to that use, and they respond to that use on the basis of, if I may use the expression, personal space. That is, how much space do they have?
It's not surprising that upon seeing the blow from one of the estimated 600 whales that are in Southeast in the summer, boaters frequently turn toward the mammal for a closer view. The law says you will not pursue humpback whales and will not upset their habitat by fouling their water or taking their food.
When an animal is as exciting in its proximity to ourselves as a whale can be, there's no question that people will, quote unquote, as defined in the law, pursue a humpback whale. They will go to it, that's pursuit. And they will do it more than once. And they will do it oblivious of how their vessel sounds. Okay? So, do I feel that people ought to pursue them? Yes, in order for people to learn. Do I feel that that's deleterious in some cases? Absolutely, provably deleterious in some cases.
Surveys show 80% of tourists coming to Alaska want to see wildlife. A killer whale Juraz and his students brought to Juneau to dissect proved his point about local public interest in whales.
And what's very apparent now is that when we put a killer whale out on the tarmac there at the Marine Tech Center, in a single day, 750 people come by, and we think, oh my goodness, you'll not tap that. And the next day, over 1,000 people come to look at that animal. And those are all community people. Now, it's obvious that in this community, we want to show people what whales are about. In terms of tourism, there is no question that if we present things like that full-bodied whale out there, and we show them what the lungs and the heart and the genitalia look like, that will impress them. That will make them happy that they've learned something that was worth going 2,000 miles to go find out about.
Juraz thinks the public needs to have access to whales, but hopefully not disturbing them. The solution? Make replicas of whale skeletons.
Make it out of fiberglass and epoxy resin, put it up in a place where they can go up and touch it, and you'll find people are extremely happy with that experience here, and that's what will count.
Juraz can make accurate replicas by studying real whales. In 1981, 2 whales were found on the beach in Seymour Canal on Admiralty Island. Juraz took 114 students from 3 different high schools who for 2 solid months from first light until after last light dissected and studied the whales.
We began in January, and we worked all of February and all of March, and literally on April 1st of 1981, we delivered 2 full sets of bones to Juneau at the docks here. We retrieved every single bone. We retrieved the baleen. We recorded where the barnacles were on the body. We recorded where the lice were on the body. We identified what pigmentation patterns existed, and went through the entire body with blubber thicknesses and tissue samplings, and we even checked for the level of DDT and PCBs in the blubber.
And so Chuck Juraz continues his study of whales, collection of their bones, and plans for replications so the general public can have access to this marvelous creature.
My name is Jim Marquardt, and I live in Juneau. Travel to Haines a lot. And one of my favorite activities in Southeast is probably hunting, plus hiking, fishing, traveling on the ferry when it's a nice day.
My name is Lynn Stevens. I'm from Juneau. My favorite activity up here is scuba diving, and I guess my favorite place is Haines. I have some property up there, and the weather's nice, and I love it up there.
We're from Ketchikan, Alaska. My name's Pat Fordney, and I have my little girl Kara with me today. And I'm afraid our favorite activity is beachcombing. We spend our life at the beach there in Ketchikan. And I suppose picking berries and hiking the trails there.
My name is Evelyn Dunn, and I live at Oak Bay, Alaska. And my favorite activity is being outdoors. Any place outdoors in our beautiful country.
My name is William T. Dunn, and I live in Oak Bay and have for almost 35 years now. 30 years now, I beg your pardon. I've been here 35 years. And my favorite activity? One of my favorite activities, to be quite candid, is sitting up in front of the garage smoking a good cigar. Isn't that awful?
No. I'm from Juneau, and my name is Casey Galdabini. I like to climb at the rocks at the glacier. Just kind of go to the mall, and my favorite place in Southeast is Juneau.
From the spectacular sight of whales beneath our southeast waters, the Rain Country Journal now switches to the historic site of Russian Orthodox churches along our shores. Here in Juneau, St. Nicholas was built in 1894. In Sitka, St. Michael's Cathedral was built 50 years before that. St. Michael's now serves as the seat of the Russian Orthodox Church in Alaska.
The spires of St. Michael's Cathedral dominate Sitka's skyline. Located in the heart of the once Russian capital of Alaska, the church is the historical anchor of Sitka and the Orthodox Church of America. St. Michael's was the first Orthodox cathedral to be built in the new land.
This was the seat of the first Orthodox bishop in the United States, and Bishop Innocent Veniaminov in 1840 was consecrated Bishop of Alaska, and the Russian-American Company in 1844 built this cathedral for Bishop Innocent, and in 1848 it was consecrated by him.
The Orthodox Church is a fundamental Catholic church.
The Orthodox faith is a Catholic church. It was at the time of Christ, there was, after the death and resurrection and ascension of Christ, there was one apostolic and Catholic church. And this church, the Orthodox Church, is part of that church. It was the same as the Roman Catholic Church until 1054. Before 1054, it was known as the Apostolic Church, the one in the... And in 1054, there was a split between Constantinople and Rome. And we became the Eastern Catholics, they became the Western Catholics.
Although St. Michael's is the historical seat of the American Orthodox Church, it, like other Orthodox churches in Alaska, is referred to as Russian Orthodox. That label is in part a tribute to the early faithful who built and attended the church.
When the Orthodox Church goes into a country becomes self-sustaining and has its own seminaries, its own hierarchy, so on. Usually it is granted its independence from its mother church, and at that point it takes on the title of the country it is in. And this is where you get the Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Syrian Orthodox, Albanian, Romanian, so on. The Diocese of Alaska kept the title of Russian Orthodox Diocese of Sitka and Alaska, because many of us are half Russian and half Aleut and half Eskimo and half Tlingit and so on, and half Russian. So, but we are under the Orthodox Church in America.
Every summer, thousands of tourists come ashore at Sitka to see St. Michael's Cathedral. Although few practice the Orthodox religion, nearly all appreciate the aging icons that help believers stay in touch with their God.
There are 3 altars in the church here. The main altar is dedicated to the Archangel Michael, and the right side altar is dedicated to St. Innocent, who's the original architect and builder of the church, and our left side is dedicated to Our Lady of Sitka. It's originally, the icon is painted after the pattern of Our Lady of Kazan. Most of the icons that you see in the cathedral here are from the original church. This was the 3rd church built in Sitka. There was one out at Old Sitka. The second is up by the blockhouse on Marine Street, and this was the 3rd and the largest one. Although there's a chapel in the Russian bishop's house. And this was the bishop's chapel. And but these icons were first in the other churches, and then when this one was built, many of them were sent here from Russia for the cathedral. Others were transferred from the other smaller churches from here in Sitka. And but they range anywhere from the mid-1700s. And some of our more modern ones we have of St. Herman, who was canonized as saint in 1970, and St. Innocent, who was canonized in 77. So our icons range anywhere from the, as I said, 1700s and on up to the 1970s. They are a constant reminder to us of the saint, of his life, and they are sort of like, when we think of a certain saint, when we see his icon, then we think of his life, his example that he gave to us. And in the Bible, as you see, they show, the pictures in there about the events that happened in the Bible. In the Orthodox Church, the icons are surrounding us and all around us. And as we believe, the saints and God is all around us.
Many of the icons in St. Michael's have survived not only hundreds of years of worship, but revolution, flood, and fire.
And as you know, in 1966, on January 2nd, there was a street fire, and the church caught fire also. And the townspeople came in and took out all the iconography and all the artifacts that you see in here today. Even the doors in the center are called the royal doors. These are from the original church. They were ripped off their hinges at the time of the fire and carried out.
While St. Michael's is unquestionably the main tourist attraction in Sitka, it is first of all a place of worship for 150 families.
This is first of all a church, a place of worship, and we let this be known to even the tourists that do come into the church. I mean, we don't allow them any food in here or any cigarettes or smoking, or the gentlemen have to take off their hats and so on. We treat it, very reverently, and we expect our visitors to do the same also. God has blessed us very well with our icons and in the church here.
The Russian Orthodox Church has been living on Alaska soil for nearly 200 years. Little flowers must be reborn each year. Providing for their colorful return requires a bit of care to ensure fall bulbs bring spring flowers.
Jackie Lorensen is a member of the Juneau Garden Club. She is recognized as a master gardener by the Cooperative Extension Service. She is both a lecturer and a columnist on gardening in Southeast. I asked her what the key to a nice garden is.
The most important part of any garden is the soil. That's your basic building material. And we have basically 3 kinds of soils in Juneau. And what you're apt to find if you live in the valley is this kind of clay, silty clay. And you can tell if you have clay, it'll roll into a ball, and there it is, and it won't drain. You might have a gravelly, sandy stuff if you've built right on the subsoil. And this has absolutely no nutrient value at all. The clay has nutrients, doesn't drain. This drains, but there's nothing in it for the plants to eat. If you're built on what was forested land, you're apt to have this very rich, peaty soil. It's good soil, lots of nutrients, but it's very acid, and again, it won't drain. So you have to add things. You can mix them together in different quantities. You may have to add peat moss, which you can purchase. Ideally, you're going to end up with something that has a good, what they call a tithe to it, or tith to it. It crumbles nicely in your hands, it drains well, and it's a good ratio of organic stuff like the peat or this forest loam and the stuff that drains, which is the sand. So you just go for a good mix of good draining things, granular things, and then the things that have the nutrients in it. When you're planting bulbs, you try to go for a natural effect, and you get that effect not by lining up tulips or daffodils in little rows like soldiers. That looks pretty artificial. You want to get a natural effect, and to do that, you can take the bulbs and just toss them out with your hands. Just let them fall randomly, and always plant a mass of color. Bulbs look very silly, one here, one there. You don't get a very good, massive, impressive effect. Plant at least 10 or 12 bulbs together, and of the crocus, plant 20 or 30 together in a sweep or a drift. Dig your hole and put daffodils and tulips go down, 6 to 8 inches, even a little deeper for tulips. Dig a nice hole so you kind of loosen the soil, not just the width of the hole. That's why I don't like those bulb planters. They just dig a little narrow tunnel. Loosen up that soil pretty good to the right depth. Before you plant the bulb, take a handful of steamed bone meal, or I use good fertilizer, 10-20-10 for our poor soils. Just mix a couple little tablespoons down in there, work it around, and then set the bulb root side down, obviously, pointed side up for daffodils and tulips. Set it down in there, and then very gently, making sure you don't tip the bulb over, cover that up and just pack it lightly. And notice this soil is going to drain well. It does have quite a bit of gravel in it, but you need that. Bulbs will not tolerate a wet soil. Another good place to plant bulbs is in a rock garden. Many of the things that bloom in a rock garden, such as the primroses and other alpines, do bloom in the spring. About the same time the bulbs will bloom, so you have a nice combination of spring blooming plants. Now, after the bulbs are done blooming, you need to leave the foliage on the plant, and it does get to look pretty ratty, but what is happening is that the leaves of the daffodils and the tulips and the other bulbs are making food that is going down the leaf and into the bulb, and what that does is make food for the bulb to use next year when it blooms. So you have to leave those leaves on, and you can plant over the top of them with various things, and I'll talk about that later. But once these are done making food, they'll start to shrivel and turn yellow. And that's the time when you can cut them off. Just hold them up and snip them off at the ground level. Don't cut them off before they've turned brown and shriveled up, because you will essentially be cutting off the blooms that you would have next year. Now, this will leave some pretty bare places in your garden unless you have planted over the top of them with other things. And some of the things that you can use to fill in the bare places that were occupied by the flowering bulbs are annuals. If you want to do the simplest thing, take a package of nasturtium seeds, sprinkle nasturtium seeds around and poke them in the ground, and they will grow and cover up what was a blooming bulb area that's now a bare spot in your garden. Other plants that you can use are the annuals such as the alyssum. They're low growing and they don't put down a very long root, so they won't interfere with the bulbs. Another thing you can do is plant bulbs among sedum, ground cover of this type. The bulbs will come up through the sedum early in the spring and be tall. Once the leaves start to die back, you can pull the leaves kind of under and tuck them under the sedum. The sedum will be by that time starting to grow and will cover over those unsightly leaves as they ripen. So there are lots of things you can use to plant over the top of the bulbs once they're have stopped blooming, and that will cover up those unsightly places in your garden.
If you have trouble finding a wide enough selection of bulbs in Juneau, a number of catalogs are available. But be certain that you select varieties proven to do well in our climate.
The bulb varieties that do best here really are tulips, daffodils, the little grape hyacinth, the little small blue ones, and crocuses. And when you go to buy these bulbs locally, you need to look for healthy bulbs, because occasionally you will come across some bulbs that just aren't in good condition. When you look for a healthy bulb, I'm going to show an onion simply because it is a bulb, and you can grow allium here, which is a flowering onion. But this onion shows what you look for when you buy bulbs. This is a mold on here, and it can be this gray-blue or sometimes tan. Don't buy a bulb that's moldy. That's an unhealthy bulb. Don't buy a bulb that's completely dried out and crumbly. It's no longer living. Don't buy a bulb that has any obvious bruises, and don't buy a bulb that has mushy spots. You pick out a bulb basically the way you'd pick out an onion or a potato or any kind of a root vegetable. I think people should plant bulbs because we have so many gray days in the spring, and if you get your bulbs in the ground and you get some color in the early spring, it gives you the enthusiasm and kind of the hope to get out there and plant the garden for the rest of the year.
The Juneau man who studies whales, the historic cathedral in Sitka, and taking care of business in the fall garden are just a few of the parts that make up rain country. Join us again next week when we'll weave a few more parts to the fabric of our land by visiting another Southeasterner and another location and learning of another activity. Join us again then for another Rain Country. I'm Scott Foster. Have a good day.